The first thing I noticed was the mirror, shattered across the floor like a warning. The second was the silence. Shadow stood still, nose twitching, every muscle tight. He had been out of commission for nearly 2 years, shelved after his handler retired, forgotten like an old tool no one believed in anymore. But I believed. I had a gut feeling that he still had something left to give. Everyone else on the team rolled their eyes when I asked to take him out. Forensics said the scene was tapped. Clean. Nothing left to find. But then Shadow froze. Just one step from the mirror's edge. His body pointed, not like a trick, but like he knew. That was when I saw it. A blood-stained rope, half buried under the debris. The case no one could crack had just opened. Like, share, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. We'd love to know. The first thing I noticed was the mirror, shattered across the floor like a warning. The second was the silence. Shadow stood still, nose twitching, every muscle tight. He had been out of commission for nearly 2 years, shelved after his handler retired, forgotten like an old tool no one believed in anymore. But I believed. I had a gut feeling that he still had something left to give. Everyone else on the team rolled their eyes when I asked to take him out. Forensics said the scene was tapped. Clean. Nothing left to find. But then Shadow froze. Just one step from the mirror's edge. His body pointed, not like a trick, but like he knew. That was when I saw it. A blood-stained rope, half buried under the debris. The case no one could crack had just opened. 2 weeks earlier, I had only heard Shadow's name in whispers. Older officers spoke about him like a myth. A dog who once sniffed out an entire trafficking ring with a single locker search. But time moves fast in law enforcement. You either keep pace or you disappear. Shadow had disappeared, locked away in the back kennels, half forgotten. The first time I saw him, I could barely tell if he was still alert. He didn't bark or shift, just sat in the corner of his cage, eyes tracking me like he already knew who I was. Captain warned me not to get attached. That dog's done his duty. Let him rest. But the case we were working, codenamed Hollow Birch, had no suspects, no leads, and a growing mountain of pressure. A teenager had vanished walking home from school. Her backpack was found a mile off course in the woods behind an industrial zone. No prints, no footage, just a broken trail of scattered belongings and an eerie, dead-end silence. The kind that crawls into your gut and doesn't let go. I kept going back to Shadow's cage, feeding him bits of jerky, talking to him like he was already on the team. At first, he didn't react. Then one day, he stood when he saw me, walked to the gate, waited. We got clearance 2 days later. "On your own time, Trent," the captain said. "If you think there's still something in that dog, prove it." I drove Shadow out to the scene myself. It was early winter, gray sky, frost in the air, breath clouding as I walked. The trees loomed like mute sentries. Forensics had already pulled back, left the site marked and taped. No one expected anything more from it. Just empty woods and a shed with a mirror shattered inside. But when we reached the clearing, Shadow's head lifted. His body shifted. Energy returned to his frame like someone had flipped a switch. He moved with purpose. Not random sniffing, precision. He circled the perimeter, then walked to the shed. That's when the silence hit. The stillness right before he stopped. His gaze locked on that broken mirror. He stepped once and froze. My breath caught. I looked where his nose pointed, and there it was. Just under the rotted floorboards, hidden in a tangle of insulation and soot, a rope, stained dark, frayed at both ends. Not catalogued, not marked. I radioed it in. Forensics returned within the hour. I stayed with Shadow the entire time, hand resting on his back. I could feel his heartbeat, calm, steady, focused. When Nina from the lab saw the rope, her jaw tightened. "This was never reported," she said. "This could change everything." Later that night, Shadow wouldn't settle. He paced in the kennel, eyes fixed on the gate. It wasn't just that he had found something. It was like he knew we weren't done yet. The next morning, the lab results came back, and that's when the real nightmare began. The rope came back positive for 2 types of blood, one matching the missing teen, Ava McLaren, and the other unidentified. The lab flagged the sample as male, but no match hit the database. Still, it cracked open what had felt like a sealed tomb. Until that morning, we had nothing tying Ava to a suspect. Now, we had proof of injury at the scene, and maybe something worse. Shadow sat by my desk like he belonged there. He had refused his kennel all morning, planted himself right under my feet, while I went through the reopened case file. His ears perked every time someone passed, and I realized something then. This wasn't just a dog with instincts. He watched. Everything. Everyone. Like he was cataloging patterns in his own way. I read the initial field report again. Ava had been last seen walking down Timberline Road. Same path she used every day. No sign of struggle. But her phone went dead just past the lumber yard on the edge of the industrial woods. A 12-minute gap. And no one had been able to explain it. I requested clearance to bring Shadow back out to the site. Nina signed off reluctantly. "You already got lucky once," she said. "Don't build a case on a ghost." But I wasn't guessing. I felt it. There was more. Back at the scene, the wind had picked up. The trees whispered that brittle winter language, every gust rattling the broken glass still stuck in the shed frame. I let Shadow out of the cruiser and unclipped his lead. He didn't run. He listened. Then, slow and steady, he moved toward the woods behind the shed. Not the trail forensics had marked, but a narrow cut through the brush, half overgrown, scattered with fallen branches. He stopped twice to sniff the air. His muscles coiled as he dipped his head low, then moved faster, more urgent. That's when I saw them. Prints. Human. Faint. Overlapping. Like someone had been circling. I called it in, marked the spot, and followed him deeper in. About 30 yards in, Shadow came to a halt. He pawed once at the ground, then sat, nose still aimed at the base of a tree that had half rotted, its bark peeled open like a wound. Inside, tucked in the hollow, was something wrapped in fabric. I eased it out with gloves, a hoodie. Navy blue, soaked through and stiff with cold. Inside the pocket, a keychain. Ava's initials. This hadn't been searched. It was too far from the original radius. I radioed Nina. She cursed under her breath, told me not to move another inch. Shadow didn't move either. He just stared at the hoodie like it confirmed what he already knew. Forensics arrived again. This time, the captain came too. "You're telling me the dog led you here?" he asked, squinting at the hollow. "No, sir," I said. "He brought us here." Back at the station, word spread fast. A few officers started side-eyeing me like maybe I knew more than I was saying. Shadow's kennel was moved closer to the front, and someone even wrote, "Legend Lives," in dry erase on the whiteboard next to his name. But Captain pulled me aside after dinner. "Keep your head down," he said. "This case has eyes on it now. And if this goes sideways, no dog's gonna take the fall." I didn't care. Shadow had changed something in the room. People were watching him now. The same dog they'd forgotten was now walking the halls like he had a badge of his own. But it came at a cost. That night, someone left a note in my locker. "Back off. Case was clean for a reason." The next morning, Nina flagged the hoodie with trace fibers, fiberglass dust, latex paint, and something else odd. Trace amounts of stage makeup. I felt my stomach twist. We had all assumed Ava had been taken by someone transient, maybe a drifter through the woods. But now we were looking for someone local, someone who knew how to stay invisible. I walked Shadow again, this time through the alley behind the old theater building on 5th, the one boarded up since the pandemic. Nothing had come of it in early searches, But something about those paint flakes stuck with me. And Shadow? He paused near the back delivery door, nose to the concrete. Then he looked at me, not alert, not panicked, just waiting. I pried open the door. Inside, the air was stale, damp, rotten wood and rusted ladders. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped into the black. Shadow didn't hesitate. He walked 5 feet ahead, tail low, body poised. His nose swept the air, then dipped to the ground again. We passed the stage, the dressing rooms, and finally a staircase leading to the storage loft. Shadow paused at the bottom step. His ears perked, then lowered. A soft growl rumbled in his chest. Quiet. Warning. That's when we heard it. A creak. Not from us. From above. I looked at Shadow. He looked back at me, and we climbed. Each step groaned beneath our weight as we climbed the old wooden staircase. The air thickened, stale with mold and old costumes, dust dancing in the flashlight beam. Shadow moved with ghost-like precision, his paws landing silent even on the creakiest planks. The moment we reached the loft, he stopped dead. I listened. Nothing. Just the far-off hum of wind pressing against the warped window panes. No footsteps, no breath but my own. But Shadow's body remained coiled, eyes locked on a row of storage trunks near the back wall. I scanned the room. Props were scattered everywhere. Rubber swords, faux armor, cardboard bricks. An overturned mirror, cracked across its face, lay propped in the corner. My light swept past it and caught something strange, a reflection not matching my angle. I moved closer. The mirror was tilted just enough to show a gap in the wooden panel behind it. A false wall. Shadow whined, low, urgent. I called it in quietly. Backup was 15 minutes out. I had maybe 5. I slid the mirror aside, careful not to knock it over. Behind the panel was a narrow passage, no wider than a crawl space. I crouched low, pulling my flashlight tight to my chest. Shadow moved in first, tail low, shoulders tense. The moment we passed the threshold, the air dropped 10 degrees. I could hear my breath again. Short, shallow, quiet. At the end of the passage was a hatch. Shadow scratched once at the floor beside it. Then he sat. I knelt, brushing aside a layer of old carpet padding. The hatch had no lock, just a simple ring handle. I pulled. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a small subfloor compartment. It wasn't deep, maybe 4 feet from surface to bottom, but what was inside knocked the breath from my lungs. A phone, cracked screen, faint smears of dried blood along the edge. And beside it, photos, printed, folded. One of them was Ava. The others, other girls. 2 of them we had on our missing persons board. The third, I had never seen. Shadow didn't move. He just stared, unmoving, as I catalogued what I could see without disturbing the scene. There were fabric strips, zip ties, even a wig, all stuffed into a duffel bag shoved behind a broken chair leg. Whoever had used this space wasn't just hiding trophies. They were building something or someone. I backed out and secured the door. Minutes later, Nina arrived with 2 other crime scene techs and a pair of uniformed officers. The captain followed close behind. He said nothing as I briefed them, but I saw his jaw tighten when I showed him the photos. "This is bigger than Ava," he said quietly. As they photographed the evidence, Shadow sat at the top of the stairs, watching everyone move below like he was guarding the scene. When I returned to his side, he leaned into my leg, just for a second. Then he stood again, ears swiveling toward the far end of the building. That night, we ran every file again. We cross-referenced the faces, the items in the bag, and the location. We combed through every person connected to the old theater. Staff, volunteers, electricians, even janitors. One name kept bubbling up: Simon Weller, former stage manager. fired 6 years ago for inappropriate conduct. No charges ever stuck. Lived alone now, 2 towns over. Owned a beat-up white van and a property registered under an LLC that had gone dormant. He hadn't shown up on any radar because he'd moved off-grid after his firing. Paychecks through cash gigs, housing through inherited property. But what made my stomach churn wasn't just his name. It was what he left behind. In the last known group photo of the theater crew, Simon stood behind the broken mirror in the dressing room, half his face obscured, and in the reflection, a rope, hung loosely over the costume rack. That detail had haunted me for days, until I realized it wasn't just coincidence. He'd always been hiding in plain sight, around props, near mirrors, behind illusions. We got the warrant the next morning. As we drove toward Simon's last known address, Shadow sat in the rear cage, eyes alert, tail still. The sky was the same dull gray as the morning we found the rope. Rain spat on the windshield in soft bursts. No lights, no sirens. We approached the cabin slowly, tucked deep into a wooded lot past county limits. Overgrown brush obscured most of the windows. No movement inside. I let Shadow out as we breached. He didn't hesitate. He led the team straight to the crawl space under the house. And what we found stopped time. A bed, chains, a crate, old costumes, and a wall of mirrors. But one was shattered, right in the center, just like the one in the shed. Nina found Ava's hair tie beneath it, and a note. Just 6 words, scribbled in uneven ink. She saw. She ran. Too late. We got Ava back that night, alive, but barely. Shadow stood outside the ambulance, his eyes following every move. When they brought her out, bundled and bruised, she reached out with one shaking hand. Not for me, not for the medics, for him. He stepped forward, and she whispered the only word she had left, Shadow. That moment broke something in me and rebuilt something else. They say the hardest part of any case is the waiting. After the breakthrough, after the rescue, after the suspect is in custody. When everything goes still again, the rush is gone, the adrenaline fades, and all that remains is paperwork, trauma reports, and the echo of what could have happened. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt earned. Ava was alive. Hospitalized, weak, but talking. Her parents stood beside her bed like shadows themselves, pale and speechless. She had been held for 12 days in that crawl space, surviving on water, granola bars, and willpower. Simon had left during the day and returned only at night. The psychologist said that if we had waited even one more day, the ending would have been very different. Shadow didn't return to his kennel after the rescue. He stayed with me, unofficially at first. The department hadn't issued any orders, and no one seemed interested in separating us. He'd earned that space. Every officer passed him now with a kind of reverence, like he had shed his status as a tool and stepped into something more mythic. But I knew the cost. That night after the arrest, I sat with Shadow on the back steps of the precinct. The sky was low and red, like it had been scrubbed raw. He lay next to me, chin resting on his paws, and I could feel the tremble in his breathing. Not fear, not cold, just the release of something too heavy to hold forever. I thought about the rope, the mirror, the hoodie. Each symbol had meant something more than physical evidence. They were echoes of trauma, of stories buried under neglect, of things left to rot in quiet corners. And Shadow had heard all of them, read them in the air like scars, translated them for those of us who had forgotten how to see. Captain Holder pulled me into his office the next morning. The blinds were half closed, light cutting the room into sharp angles. "You know they're calling him a hero," he said, nodding toward the window where Shadow sat watching traffic. He is. You also know we can't put a dog back on the active roster after retirement. Policy. I said nothing. He sighed. But there's precedent for handler reassignments. If you want him permanently. I met his eyes. I do. The transfer took 2 days. By Friday, Shadow had a new badge, a new vest, and a new home. My home. I wasn't ready for what came next. Simon Weller's interrogation was short. He confessed almost immediately, not out of remorse, but control. He detailed the manipulation, the planning, the hiding in plain sight. He spoke about the mirrors like they were sacred, portals where his true work could be seen. The rope. A reminder, he said, that sometimes you need to bind beauty to keep it from running. That sentence alone would haunt me for years. But it was what he said last that shook me most. She knew my face. But he, the dog, he smelled it. Simon had seen Shadow at the scene. He knew we weren't chasing randomly. He knew Shadow was coming. The DA fast-tracked charges. 3 confirmed abductions, 1 attempted murder, multiple counts of unlawful confinement. Ava's testimony filled in the rest. But one question kept returning, even after the sentencing, even after the headlines faded. Why had the case gone cold in the first place? Why had evidence been missed? And that's when the second fracture revealed itself. Ava remembered a voice. Female, calm, practiced. Not Simon's. Someone who had entered the crawl space once, only once, to check inventory. The voice had said, "You're not the first. Just stay quiet, and this will be over faster." Nina, forensics lead. I fought the thought like fire. It didn't make sense. She had been the one to approve my request to take Shadow out. She had processed the rope, called in the lab team, but too many things fit. The fiberglass on the hoodie, the trace paint, the fact that the first sweep of the theater had come up blank. I requested her field logs. Some were missing. The captain ordered an internal audit. 3 days later, Nina was gone. No letter, no resignation, no word, just her badge left on her desk, and on her monitor, a paused security feed from the station's evidence locker. Frame 2302, Nina, holding Ava's phone, wearing latex gloves, unlogged. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Shadow paced the room when I got home that night, uneasy, his tail swishing in irregular sweeps. He kept sniffing the front door like someone had stood there too long. Like someone had watched, I reinforced the windows. I changed the locks, and I realized the case wasn't over. We had stopped the monster, but someone had built the stage, and someone else had held the lights. Shadow didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. The next morning, he was already standing by the door when I picked up my badge. This time, he didn't wait for permission. He just looked at me once and walked straight to the shattered mirror. I had propped against the entry wall, a crack down the middle, a reflection split in 2. One side showed me, the other, Shadow, and we both understood what needed to happen next. They called it the end of the hollow birch case. But the thing about endings, they're just disguises, illusions, costumes for the truth still pacing beneath. We found Nina 3 weeks later, or rather, Shadow did. She'd been staying in a seasonal rental on the edge of Bellwood Lake, a place she used to visit during college breaks. It had no security system, no neighbors for miles, just pines, fog, and her own guilt keeping her company. Shadow led us there on a Tuesday. I had reopened Ava's file after noticing something odd. Nina's print, her clean fingerprint, on the inside of the theater trapdoor hatch. The trapdoor she swore she had never touched. She documented it, photographed it, but never opened it, she claimed. That single print unraveled her story. I put Shadow in the passenger seat and drove through the fog while the wipers kept beat with my pulse. When we got there, the cabin looked empty. But Shadow stiffened the moment we cut the engine. He jumped down, nose low, tail straight, eyes locked on the porch. I followed without a word. The door was unlocked. Inside, the place smelled of cinnamon candles and bleach. Too clean, too intentional. Like someone trying to erase themselves. Shadow didn't bark. He walked straight to the back room and pawed gently at the floor. Under a loose plank, we found a hard drive. It held surveillance clips, some from the theater, some from the evidence room, and some of girls. Crying. Begging. All with timestamps matching gaps in the original case files Nina had overseen. She hadn't just helped Simon Weller, she had curated his scenes, set the stage, deleted the noise, and made sure Shadow was never called in during her tenure. Until me. Until the rookie too naive to let protocol bury instinct. Arrested her that night. She didn't resist, didn't cry. She only said one thing as they cuffed her. You never should have pulled him off the shelf. Shadow stood beside me, unmoved. That evening, I sat with him on the precinct roof. He watched the stars like they made more sense than anything below. I ran my fingers along his fur, tracing the scar just beneath his left ear, the one his original handler told me came from a raid gone sideways. He leaned into my chest like he needed to feel my heart steady, and I finally let the tears fall. For Ava. For the girls we couldn't save. For the dog, who was never supposed to return. Shadow didn't break the case with his teeth. He did it with his silence, his presence, his refusal to forget. Ava recovered slowly. She visited the precinct on a gray spring morning, 6 weeks after the arrest. Her hair had started to grow back. She carried a sketchbook in her hands, fingers stained with charcoal. She didn't say much, just sat on the bench near the parking lot and waited. I brought Shadow out. The moment she saw him, she smiled. Not the kind you give a stranger, but the kind you save for someone who saw you when the world didn't. She held out her drawing. It was a mirror, cracked down the middle. One side held Ava, shadows under her eyes, a rope in her hands. The other side? Shadow, eyes steady, mouth closed, watching, below the frame. She had written one line. He remembered what everyone else forgot. I keep that sketch in my locker. Some days, I pull it out just to remind myself that memory isn't just data. It's instinct. It's scent. It's the tug in your chest that something is wrong even when the evidence says otherwise. Shadow works fewer cases now. He's older, his gait slower. The fire still burns, but with less urgency. Like he knows the worst is behind us. Or maybe he just trusts that I'll see the signs when he no longer can. We walk every morning past the theater. They finally tore it down last month. All that's left is a slab of concrete, weeds, and one corner of mirror glass still embedded in the ground. Shadow always stops there, stares at it, and moves on. I think he's not just looking back. I think he's making sure no one else is left behind. So, when they ask me why I trust a retired K9 more than half the team, I don't give them numbers. I don't cite records. I just say, because he never needed words to tell the truth. And he never, ever stopped looking. If this rescue moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe for more stories like this.